Hi, and welcome to the next episode of BrainPicks, a show where we share technical tips for helping you deliver better applications faster. Today we're gonna start a small mini-series about TypeScript. In this particular episode, we're gonna walk you through how to set it up in your existing React Native application. We want to focus on the possibility of adding TypeScript as an afterthought, adding it to an existing JavaScript application. So in the beginning, you have a transitional period where you still have your JavaScript code, but some of the new components are written in TypeScript. So usually rewriting the whole application in a new language is not a good idea, and this way can let you slowly appreciate its benefits, the advantages that TypeScript brings us. As an example, we're going to use the application that you might know from the previous episodes. And this is like the chat application of Samuel Jackson. The only change that we can see here is that we can add our own message and send it as well. So currently it is all written in JavaScript, and what we want to do is change it, add the TypeScript support to it, and change one of the components to use TypeScript under the hood. What we need to start with is adding the dependencies. So we're gonna use Yarn, and we're gonna add all the dependencies as development dependencies. Well, the TypeScript runs on when we're working on our local machine, and what gets put in the final application is the already transpiled JavaScript. So anything that we need for the TypeScript setup doesn't need to go into the final bundle. Obviously, what we're gonna need is TypeScript itself, and also we'll need to install type annotations for the libraries that we're using. These are the ones in particular that we're going to be using are maintained by Microsoft, and they allow TypeScript to know how to interact with React or React Native, and what kind of APIs are available and what kind of types do they expect. So we're gonna add them for React. We're gonna have to add them as well for React Native. We're also using Jest, and one more for React Test Render. Renderer. Right. The next step, what we need to do is create the TypeScript config file. This will allow us to specify options that the TypeScript compiler is going to use. We can easily create one using TypeScript command with the flag in it, and we need to pass a few options. One of them would be to create prettified JavaScript. We also want to create source maps. It's gonna make the debugging easier, and we want to specify both the target and the module option to be ES 2015, and two more things. One is we need to tell him about the JSX support, and we want to specify the directory where we're gonna put the compiled JavaScript, and in our case we want to put it in build. So when we run it, we can take a look in Visual Studio. Here we have it. There are two things that we want to change in it. One is we want to uncomment this option to allow JS files, because, as I said before, we don't want to rewrite the whole application in TypeScript immediately. We want to add it gradually. So we want to keep some of the existing components of JavaScript. One more thing is we need to specify what kind of files the TypeScript compiler should care about. In our case, all of them are going to be located in the source directory. Now we can build all of it from Visual Studio Code and see what happens. So in our build directory, we have the transpiled JavaScript. But there's one more thing that we need to change before we're able to see if it worked. because if you take a look in our index.ios.js, we're loading the whole application from the source directory. But now the source directory is gonna contain both the JavaScript and TypeScript files, because that's where we keep the source files. What we want to do is use the target directory from TypeScript, which in our case is build, because that's there we will only have JavaScript. So after changing that, we can restart our React Native server and reload the application. And we can see that everything works like as it used to. However, we made all of this setup and we're passing everything from the TypeScript compiler. However, we don't have any TypeScript code. We're transpiling JavaScript into JavaScript, which makes no sense. So let's change one of the components into a TypeScript component. So for example, we have the input field component that takes care of creating our own messages. So we can simply rename it to TSX, which is the TypeScript version of JSX. And we can see that after saving the file, we got a bunch of linter errors, because now VS Code knows that we're dealing with a TypeScript React file. So let's go through them one by one, what happened here. The first one is that it cannot find the Shoutem UI module. The reason for it is, do you remember how we installed the React and React Native type annotations, so that TypeScript can know how to interact with React and React Native? TypeScript would also expect those type annotations for all the libraries that it's using. So in our case, unfortunately, Shoutem does not allow them to be installed as easily. So we're just gonna skip that. The drawback here is that TypeScript, we will not be able to control how we're interacting with the Shoutem library, and it will not be able to correct us if we're passing wrong arguments, or he will just assume that all of them can be anything, and it will just kind of trust us that we're doing it correctly, which unfortunately limits the scope of the safety that TypeScript can provide. But for now, let's just live with that. Second error is that React components are generic type, and it requires 2 type arguments, and those would be the types that are going to be used as the properties and the state of the object. In our case, just to silence the linter and put anything there, we can tell TypeScript that it can expect literally anything in this case. This is what TypeScript would have guessed anyway. Whenever you don't specify a type, it assumes it can be anything. The same we can do for the properties that are passed to the constructor. Notice that specifying the type as anything doesn't really give us any type benefits, because it can be anything. However, what we're trying to do in this episode is just make this code work, and we're gonna focus on the advantages that properly typing components is gonna bring us in the future. One last thing is that we have the onChange text handler that here it's not really anything. We can just safely say it's a string and specify it like that. We can launch the build straight from Visual Studio, and we'll see that we have an error about the Shoutem UI not being found. And when we reload the application, we'll see that nothing changed. Like, the application works as it used to work, except for the fact that now when we interacting with this component, it uses TypeScript under the hood. To sum up, in this video we only did a simple setup for TypeScript. We managed to change an existing JavaScript component into a TypeScript component, just changing 3 lines, and it was really easy to gradually add a TypeScript component into our application. In the next episode, we're gonna dig into the benefits that TypeScript brings us, the advantages in the safety of the of our application to make sure that we're using the components correctly. But for now, let's wrap up. So what we did is we walked you through how to set up TypeScript and change a simple JavaScript component into a TypeScript component. It was as easy as changing 3 lines in it. However, it doesn't really dig into the benefits of TypeScript. And that's what we're going to do in the next episode. We're going to focus on the advantages that proper typing gives us and the safety that TypeScript can bring to our application when used properly. So stay tuned and see you in the next episode. Bye.